third grade writers. So today your goal is to revise your fairy tale adaptation using a checklist. So some of you may remember this anchor chart from our classroom. This anchor chart reminds us that there's a difference between revisions and editing. So when we're revising writing, we can remember arms. You are adding, removing, moving, or substituting paragraphs, sentences, details, examples, words from your writing. So you might add a new paragraph or a sentence. You might remove unneeded paragraphs, sentences, or words. You might move around whole paragraphs or words or sentences. And you may also substitute different words or sentences for better words or sentences. That's different from cups, or editing, where you're capitalizing, looking at usage of words, punctuation, and spelling. That's editing, which we'll be doing tomorrow. Today we're just focusing on revising, arms. So you're going to be using a revising checklist today as you revise your writing. This checklist has all of the components of a really strong fairy tale. Your job is to read through the checklist and rate yourself with either a plus, which means excellent, a check, which means yes, I did that, or a minus, which means wow, I really need to work on this area for each part of your writing. So as you read through the checklist, I want you to give an example of where you have done the attribute listed on the checklist. So for example, the first attribute is, my beginning introduces the setting and characters and hooks my reader. So I said, yes, I did a pretty good job of that. I gave myself a check. And then I quoted a part of my writing where I did that. So I wrote in my piece, I wrote, Peralta Hood Pug family lived on 63rd Street. So that's my example that shows that my beginning is introducing the setting and characters. One thing I noticed that I didn't do so well in that part was hooking my reader. So I highlighted that, circled that, because I thought, that's something I might want to go back and revise later. I went down the checklist, rating myself in each category and giving examples that showed where in my writing I had done those specific things or where I hadn't done such a good job of meeting the expectations. So for example, for this one, I gave myself a minus. It says, I use descriptive words instead of said. And I noticed that on page 7 and 8 of my writing, I used a lot of said. So I just wrote down page 7 and 8. I need to go back and revise that page, and I put a little frowny face to remember. So after I went through the checklist, I noticed that there were a few areas that I wanted to revise. One of them I knew I had to revise was using descriptive words instead of said on that page 7 and 8. The other thing I noticed that I needed to revise was my ending. So as I read this, I saw that my fairy tale should have a solution, a happy ending, or a lesson learned at the end. Now, the lesson learned, I realized I didn't have a lesson learned at the end, and it does say or, so I don't have to have that, but I was thinking to myself, it might be nice to have a lesson learned. So I highlighted that and circled that. That's another thing that I'm going to revise in my writing. So after I worked through the checklist and wrote down my examples over here, I went back to my writing and I revised the 3 areas. I'm going to star the 3 areas. 1, 2, 3. So I went back to my writing and I worked on the 3 areas that I had noted on my revising checklist. I want to hook my reader, I want to have a lesson learned at the end, and I want to use descriptive words instead of said, particularly on page 7 and 8. So first I worked on my hook, on the way that I was going to hook my reader. So before I wrote my revision, my writing started with, once upon a time there lived a joyful family of pugs. The Peralta Hood Pug family lived on 63rd Street, a green tree-lined street, where cats scampered into the bushes. Times were strange, because coronavirus made it so that everyone needed to shelter in place. Little Pug Peralta had stayed inside for days. Her Zoom wasn't working, and she missed her friends. So I decided I want to hook my reader before this paragraph. I want to have something that really pulls them into my story. So I decided to write a prologue, and I decided to use a question beginning. So this is what I wrote. Have you ever wondered what it's like to stay inside day after day, unable to see your friends? Well, this is how it was for poor little Pug Peralta Hood. And then from there, I'm going to go, once upon a time, there lived a joyful family of pugs. I'm going to move into that after I have this hook in my story. So there we go. I revised my introduction, so I have a hook. I'm going to put a nice big check. Did that, one revision, done. Okay, the next thing I need to work on is having a lesson learned at the end. So I'm going to go to the end of my story. And the way that I ended before I wrote this revision was I wrote, and little Pug Peralta Hood and big Pug Peralta lived happily and safely ever after. So I decided to add on to that ending. I added, from that day forward, little Pug wore her 6-foot hat whenever she went outside. She knew that it was most important to stay healthy, and anyway, she could always play with Big Pug on Zoom. And little Pug Peralta Hood and Big Pug Peralta lived happily and safely ever after. That's my new ending. So check, I revised my ending. There's now a nice lesson learned at the end. The last thing that I wanted to do was add those descriptive words instead of said. So as I described before, as I was reading this the end of my story, I noticed that I used a lot of said. I'm going to read it to you how it was before. So, if I agree to wear this hat, you will fix my Zoom and Big Pug and I will play once again? Little Pug said. Yes, this I vow to you, the monster said. Little Pug reluctantly picked up the hat and slowly placed it on her head. As she did so, the whirl of colors and lights descended, and little Pug was transported back to her desk at home. Her computer screen lit up, and with a ping from Zoom meeting, Big Pug appeared. Big Pug, I'm so happy to see that you're safe and sound. Now we can finally play, said little Pug Peralta Hood. And so little Pug and Big Pug grabbed their balls and shoe toys and played together on Zoom for hours and hours. Thank goodness for the 6-foot monster, said little Pug as she chased her stuffed taco. And little Pug Peralta Hood and Big Pug Peralta lived happily and safely ever after. So as you can see, my ending had a lot of saids in it. And I decided to go back and I used my green pen to change those saids to words that more closely described how the characters might be saying each thing. So I said little Pug asked cautiously at this point. And the monster replied to little Pug instead of said. Here I wrote that little Pug Peralta Hood cried because she's so happy to see Big Pug safe and sound. And here I decided to say exclaimed, thank goodness for the 6-foot monster, because again, she has a lot of enthusiasm as she says it. So as you can see, I used my fairy tale revising checklist to find some areas of my writing that I wanted to fix up. Your job today is to do what I just did. You're going to use this fairy tale revising checklist to read through your writing and find at least 2 things that you want to fix up in your writing. And then you're going to go back to your writing and fix up those things. I'd love for you to share the things that you fixed up on Google Classroom. One final note is that while you're using this checklist, instead of writing a lot on the checklist, you can talk through your examples with a grown-up, but do make sure that you have examples and that you point to where you are doing these things in your writing. Have a great writing time today. Talk to you soon.